Hello again. Yes, you're seeing that right. Newbrige Lockport is no more. Introducing Montana Rail Link, the divide. And you must be wondering why Montana Rail Link and why the divide? I couldn't find the locale for Newbrige Lockport. I like the New England look with the fall colors and everything. But I also like the northwest of the United States and the arid looks and also the forests and the mountains. Then I discovered Montana Rail Link. I guess I didn't know about them before, and then I realized that they were a class 2 railroad just like Newbridge and Lockport, a bridge railroad. So I started digging more into Montana Rail Link, and they were formed in 1987 by leasing the tracks from Burlington Northern. And that kind of fit the bill because I wanted to model something in the 70s and 80s. I definitely didn't want to model modern era because I find modern railroading boring. And I didn't want to model 1950s because there is no good steam for N scale unless you have brass locomotives, and I didn't have any, so I didn't want to bother. Therefore, I decided to start in 1987 and go 15 years up to 2002-2003 as my time frame for modeling Montana Rail Link. Question was, where do you start? They still have 1,000 miles of line, and you can't really fit 1,000 lines in 120 feet of linear feet of benchwork that I had, so something had to be chopped. Question was, what are the interesting areas here? And I didn't know anything at the beginning. Looking at their subdivisions, they have 13, I guess, BNSF trackage rights to Spokane. I had to pick something that was short enough, I suppose, that I can fit into 120 feet, yet interesting to offer scenic opportunities as well, and some switching, because I really wanted to have industries online and I want to have switching and moving of goods. That's my interest. I guess I didn't want to just have trains run in circles. Problem with Montana Rail Link is that, at least in today's world, they're not doing much. There are no more industries left. I mean, there is just a few major ones, I think. Otherwise, everything is just helper service. And I didn't really care about pushing cars and locomotives over the hill. Some people do, I don't. Thus, I started with the longest, biggest footprint possible. Because don't we all do that? Billings on one end, Sandpoint on the other. 1,000 miles. Well, actually, Billings and Sandpoint were in the staging. This was more close to about 350 miles and second and third subdivisions. Still, a pretty significant chunk of railroading that need to be covered. You can also see that I've started adding interesting things for each location, industries and other infrastructure pieces. But I had to curb my enthusiasm more. Putting Montana City in the 13th sub wasn't realistic, so I got rid of it, moved Townsend to the left, and now there is Lombard Canyon and Logan after it. Also swapped Billings for Laurel, Montana, and Sandpoint still remains on the other end. And now a bit of trivia for you. Mullen Pass, you see it there? That's where half of the railroad is in this room. Mullen Pass is where Continental Divide is. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I can call this railroad the Divide because it divides the railroad in half, and I'm modeling second and third subdivision, and this divide falls within there. So I thought that was pretty nice. It's a good start. Then I decided to fiddle more with some other things, moving Drummond out of the way, putting Bonner Milltown. That place is an industrial park right now, but back in the day it was a huge sawmill, and I think the whole layout could just be that area, and you couldn't give it justice. It didn't make sense, so I had to can that. You can also see Frenchtown was added after the cement. That didn't make sense. I wanted to have a paper mill, another industry. It just couldn't fit paper mill and a cement terminal in 7 feet of that little space there. That was just cramped. Then I thought getting rid of Townsend, adding Belgrade, Bozeman area. Since Logan didn't have much happening there to me, Belgrade has many more industries. It's a larger area. Then as an alternative option, I put Logan back, got rid of Belgrade. I don't think that there was enough space for Belgrade in that aisle. And I've extended Malin Pass and added the Skyline Trestle, Greenhorn Trestle. They're actually viaducts now. And a Skyline Spur. So that whole area would have been all scenic. In the next iteration, I got rid of the Greenhorn Trestle, and you can see I got rid of Harrison. Harrison was just above Spokane, Washington. It was on the branch line. I hope you're seeing a pattern emerging here. I'm slowly coming to terms that I cannot fit everything in the space I have, and I have to be realistic because I wanted to make something believable. Then I started fiddling with sidings and yards. You can see Missoula and Helena are two major yards. Because I'm focusing on operations, I also wanted to have yard transfers between Helena and Missoula. Those don't really happen, I think, in real life, but for my purpose, I wanted to have as much action as possible. But of course, more was on the chopping block, and here is one option you see, Missoula is gone. Instead, Garrison and Silverbow are there. I discovered Silverbow and I thought it was a pretty interesting area too. It's a place that's called Port of Montana, but it's inland. There is no water there, but yet they're considered a port. There is a large facility there where they're loading cars onto autoracks, and nearby there is a UP interchange. In the next iteration, there is more reduction because you have to be realistic about what you can fit in your space. And here you're seeing glimpses of what will become a final layout. I don't know if you've also noticed, but a couple of iterations back when we removed Missoula from the layout, it now lives in staging as one endpoint with Laurel on the other side, but they've both swapped locations, and the railroad has changed direction, becoming true north. But let's take a look at the railroad map now. So here we are in Google Earth. The gray line is staging to staging, Laurel to Missoula. And the lines in color is what I'm modeling. And you can see how shorter it is what I'm modeling versus the real world that exists out there. So we're forgetting about this portion here and this portion there. And this is the second subdivision, this is the third subdivision. And then this is the line, the branch line to Port of Montana. So we go from Trident via Logan, Townsend, Helena, then we cross the divide, and then we end up in Garrison, and Phosphate is nearby. And then from Garrison there is a Y that goes down to Port of Montana. I don't have room for a Y, so it's just going to be a switch, basically, a turnout at Garrison that's going to lead to Port of Montana. The other thing is that Helena is the only major yard in my layout. Because this is a continental divide, they wouldn't push local stuff across the mountains going to Garrison and beyond. Missoula would serve that. A local from Helena would probably go east and serve things here because it's more efficient and more economical. Also today Helena is, I'm not sure that Helena actually serves as a switching yard. Well, they might, but most of the things that are happening there are helper service. But since I'm modeling 1987 to 2003, there are still online industries back then. And I'm also taking a creative license in that way that because it's the only yard, everything will be happening from Helena. There will be manifest trains coming from Laurel and Missoula bringing the goods to the online railroad. Obviously they will have to, and then whatever industries I add here will be served by Helena Yard and locals from Helena. Even if they don't exist, I'm not really stuck on the prototype. Basically, I'll just have to work with what I have. So let's go back to the layout design elements. And before I forget, I'd like to express my gratitude and appreciation to a few people on the railwire.net forums who have been extremely helpful in guiding me and teaching me about Montana because they have intimate knowledge of the area, they live there, and the history of the railroads that were going through Montana and Montana Rail Link. And without them, I don't think I would have been successful in creating the plan as is today without their hand holding. So thank you. I'm not going to name them because I don't have the permission to use their names, and if they're watching, they will know who they are. I also did not mention anything about layout planning portion and why are these things done the way they are. I'm not claiming to be an expert in layout planning. By far, there are many better people out there, and I've been learning from them for the last several years. For this layout plan and this build, I've been following Bill Baranik's design philosophy of 7 elements, namely the prototypical operations. I'm trying to get there. Walk along the main lines. You can see that you're following your train as you're progressing across the railroad. Narrow benchwork. My benchwork is 12 inches. I've sacrificed scenery so that I focus more on operations. I mean, there's still room for scenery because it's N scale, but not for some grand vistas that you could get with 2 feet depth. Long mainland runs. Again, that goes back to the narrow benchwork. I have 2 peninsulas. I could have had 1 and deeper benchwork, but then I wouldn't have the long mainland run, as I have now. Then trains traveling through scenes once. There is no going through scenes twice here. It just goes from point to point. Peninsulas with view blocks. I have these view blocks that prevent you from seeing what's on the other side, and that sort of creates the separation and distance. And then lastly, the hidden staging, and staging being one of the main and critical elements in any build for operation, where you have trains coming and going someplace else off the railroad. So the next thing was to put the main line in, get some sidings, towns, start on some industries, scenery. And then in the next iteration, you'll see the Mullen Pass moved to the left and Blossburg siding was added there. And in the Logan area, a bit of rearrangement. There is still an interchange with 3 forks at Logan, which will be removed in the next version. And then I'm also debating whether phosphate should connect to the Garrison's yard. Really, the phosphate connection is further down, or it would be further down in the layout. It's just there is no room there. The staging is there. You also see that I'm thinking to swap the interchange with 3 forks and the gas facility in Logan. But that really does not happen. What I do is swap Logan and Trident all together, because that's how it is in the prototype. Except, and then I realized that that space where Logan is way too small for Logan. That's only 6-7 feet, and then Trident is, even though it's a large facility, it's occupying the entire aisle. That's 15-16 feet there. And I feel that the gas exchange or transfer facility in Logan is also crammed in that alcove. Another change was Lombard Canyon. The track was previously on the outer edge of the peninsula. I didn't like it. I think it was close to the prototype being on the inner edge, with the Missouri River basically hugging the outer edge of the peninsula. And I think that will make a very cool scene once it's all finished. I've lost perhaps half an inch in radius there, but it's 17.5, and I don't think it's a big deal in that space. You also notice that Helena is starting to appear. The yard at Helena is coming through a first iteration. The area of Winston before Helena, and also the areas of Elliston and Avon after Blossburg are there. And in the lower center left, there is a UP interchange now at Silver Bow for added operational interest. About a week later, in the next version, I'm experimenting with another yard setup in Helena. This is not necessarily the way prototype is. I've moved the station around, and some sidings actually they're stub added in my version, but they're not in the prototype. And then several days later, I go back to the Helena yard and actually implement a more close to the prototype look with double-sided tracks in the yard and the engine facility across the street or across the tracks from the main Helena station. Then several days later, I swap Logan and Trident to the original setup back to the peninsula for Logan and Trident back in the shorter section. I think Logan just needed more space. The oil transfer facility in Logan is also now in its final place where I really wanted to put it. Although someone might argue that that facility was not built in Logan until mid-2010s, and I'm modeling 1987 to 2003, and that's where the creative license comes in. But on another note, I want to point out that every iteration had a few days in between, and I believe it's important to sleep on your ideas and let them brew in your head and brew on paper and see what happens, whether they stand the test or they don't. And if they don't, you just change them, and if they do, then you keep them. And another lesson to myself even is never be afraid to remove things, to unclutter and leave some breathing room for operators between towns, between industries, basically scenic areas where your eyes relax and you relax and trades are just running on their own. Then I'm kind of thinking, well, Silver Bow is a port. Why is there no boat there? And this might not stay there, but I thought, what the heck, I'll just add a real port there with a ship. And this is truly a long stretch because it's so far inland. Even if Missouri River was close by, it wouldn't be wide or deep enough for any of these things to happen. Then almost a whole month passes by and life comes in the way and whatnot. But I also rearranged the track at Garrison. The branch line leading to Silver Bow is now coming off the center of the lowest yard track. On the prototype they have a Y there, I just don't have space for it. So I work a bit more on that and I come up with this, and now we are up to date. This is the plan as it is today, and that is the plan I will be building. Interestingly, one of the members of the Railwire.net forums that was helping me out with this plan said that on my complaint about diesels having to push the cars versus pull them, he said, if the prototype inherited the track, and they did, then that's what they would do. And in a sense, I've created a switching puzzle for an operator in this area. Diesel engines don't really need a Y, as long as they have a runaround track, and in this plan, they actually do. So that's another unexpected operational interest that just happened through all these iterations. So that is the plan. I hope you like it. Thank you for staying with me for 17 minutes in this presentation and seeing the evolution of a design. This plan has taken months of research, and 17 minutes was a very short time to cram all that. And I've excluded a lot of things about the prototype and photos I've gathered and videos I've seen and references I've read about Montana Railing from various websites. Unfortunately, in the meantime, Montana Railing has become a fallen flag railroad. In the middle of January 2022, the management of MRL has decided to conclude their lease with BNSF, which was supposed to last until 2047, 60 years. On a bright side, all the employees of MRL will remain where they are, and their labor agreements will remain, their jobs will be there, they will just work under BNSF. And BNSF has renamed the entire stretch of 1,000 miles MRL subdivision, honoring the Montana Railing Railroad that was there since 1987. I think that was pretty cool. And we'll see what the future brings for MRL and BNSF in that area. But on this layout, we'll be partying like it's 1999. But before we start laying the track down, there is still a bit more bench work to be done. In Helena, there is a bump out, in Trident, there is a bump out. So we'll discuss that in the next episode. Until then, keep railroading.